Right, so we're going to delve into this DNA thing. Very interesting because it's a recent science. It's a new science. Say about 8 years old, something like that. I think the first genome was discovered in the 1950s, and they've been breaking it down ever since, and more research. Now everybody's doing the DNA thing and all that stuff. So before that time, racism believed that there was all these different races. But what that man's telling you is everyone is one. We all are one race. Africa is the place where everybody started on this planet. Everyone can trace their deepest roots back to the continent of Africa. And DNA is now showing them that they need African DNA. They need to study it because they're finding out all this stuff about diseases and resistance to things and all kind of thing. You see, I was reading this, I do some research on this, right? I was reading this science book, paper about where white people came from, because I wanted to know, where did white people come from? How did they come about? And they come about in full about 8,500 years ago. Just 8,500 years ago, there's 2 genes that make up pale skin, right? And them genes are not visible in the DNA story until 8,500 years that they are there a lot. Before that time, everybody in the planet was some different shade of brown. Everybody was a different shade of brown. Be it dark, that is black, or light, but it was brown all the time. And then about 8,500 years ago, some of that group lost all their pigmentation completely. Now, that group of brown people even had blue eyes, especially in Europe. In Europe, they keep finding these old skeletons, 10,000 years old. And now, through the DNA, when they go down into the DNA, they discover that this skeleton, they found one in Sweden recently. You know the one they found in England, right? Which they did. They found that he had brown skin, blue eyes, black hair. They found one in Sweden, 10,000 years old. Same thing, brown skin, blue eyes, black hair. So this blue-eyed thing was already there before the pale skin, right? And they also found that in Africa, the group that has these 2 genes that make up the pale skin more than any other African group is in Ethiopia. So it's there, but that gene hasn't come out.
Good afternoon, Africans. Yes, you can see me right now in an African village. I'm carrying my sweet sugarcane, as you can see. Yeah. So let's talk about how blessed, how, beautiful the Lord made us black people. Many times we've been told that Africa is a poor country. Africa is the land of the naive people, A lot has been told about us to wipe out our history. But let me tell you this. I've always tried hard to represent to you Africa in the most beautiful way. I've always tried to show you Africa in a way that is not shown by the majority of Western media, right? And so, I don't know if you've heard about the concept of eugenics, because if you've heard about the concept of eugenics, you likely know that there was once an agenda to wipe out black people. The idea of wiping black people is not an idea that was born yesterday. It is an idea that has always existed for many, many centuries. Even the slave master, when they were coming to Africa to enslave the black people, they believed that Africans were immune to some kind of diseases, Africans were tolerant to diseases, and Africans were strong. That is how they believed, and they believed right? So, eugenics is something which was used by many of these slave masters. I'm speaking of the Europeans, and I'm speaking of the Arab slave masters of those old times, because we had the Indian Ocean trade, and we also had the transatlantic trade. Not much is known about the Indian Ocean trade, but yes, it did exist. So with the Indian Ocean trade, they tried castrating the black males so that there wouldn't be black population in the Arabian lands. Yeah, But in the Americas, they didn't castrate us. What they did is that they procreated us. They chose people whom they thought is in quotation. They thought that these people are superior. These people have a good physique. These people have what they would then term as a standard of beauty. They would selectively breed these people with themselves so that they would continue producing black people of their own phenotypical preference, right? Yeah, so they did selective breeding of black people. Yes, and if you didn't know, the black gene is the most dominant gene. If you take a black man and a white woman, the baby will be black, not white. Black is always dominant over white. Yeah. So the concept of terminating black people has always existed. Dr. Lila Africa has always told us that they also tried wiping out blacks using food, using nutrition, in what Dr. Lila Africa called nutricide. Yeah? Dr. Lila Africa advises Africans to grow their own food, such as these. You see these I'm holding, this sugar cane. He advises Africans to rely on their own food supply and food chain. There's more that can be told about how they've tried wiping black people, and a gentleman, a black American individual, is explaining how this course took place and how he believes that the oppressors, I'll call them, are trying to, to continue themselves, because they may think that they are going extinct in a few, maybe in the future. So they are trying to come in between the black people to come and interbreed. They need the black seed to continue their generation. It's such a funny thing that those people who are despised are the people with whom still you need their seeds. This gentleman has a very, very powerful argument. Let's listen to him. I shall get back.
Hello people, it's Mr. Reasoning here. What I'm going to tell you and what you're going to hear is going to make you understand everything that I've been talking about in the past few weeks about these adverts that they keep showing about black man, white woman constantly, or mixed race couples and all that. Not that I ain't got nothing against mixed race relationships, because I've had them myself, right? So don't think I'm coming for you. No, that's not what this is about. It's about noticing what's going on the TV and in films, right? This is gonna answer the questions. And I said before, something's going on. This is gonna show you something's going on, right? First of all, let's start here. Listen.
Did you know that Africa is home to the most genetically diverse people on the planet? But what does that really mean? And why is African DNA so unique compared to the rest of the world? Think about this. Every single person on Earth can trace their ancestral roots back to Africa. That's right, whether you're living in Asia, Europe, the Americas, or Australia, the genetic blueprint of humanity began on the African continent. But how does that impact the way we view genetics, evolution, and even the future of medicine? Today, we're diving deep into the science, history, and cultural importance of African DNA. We'll explore its incredible diversity, what makes it different, and why it holds the key to unlocking some of the biggest mysteries about human health and evolution. So
we're gonna delve into this DNA thing is very interesting because it's a recent science, it's a new science, say about 80 years old, something like that. I think the first genome was discovered in the 1950s, and they've been breaking it down ever since, and more research. Now everybody's doing the DNA thing and all that stuff. So before that time, racism believed that there was all these different races, but what that man's telling you is everyone is one. We all are one race. Africa is the place where everybody started on this planet. Everyone can trace their deepest roots back to the continent of Africa, and DNA is now showing them that they need African DNA. They need to study it because they're finding out all this stuff about diseases and resistance to things and all kind of thing. You see, I was reading this I do some research on this, right? I was reading this science book paper about where white people came from, because I wanted to know, where did white people come from? How did they come about? And they come about in full about 8,500 years ago. Just 8,500 years ago, there's two genes that make up pale skin, right? And them genes are not visible in the DNA story until 8,500 years that they are there a lot. Before that time, everybody in the planet was some different shade of brown. Everybody was a different shade of brown. Be it dark, that is black, or light, but it was brown all the time. And then about 8,500 years ago, some of that group lost all their pigmentation completely. Now, that group of brown people even had blue eyes, especially in Europe. In Europe, they keep finding these old skeletons, 10,000 years old. And now, through the DNA, when they go down into the DNA, they discover that this skeleton, they found one in Sweden recently. You know the one they found in England, right? Which they did. They found that he had brown skin, blue eyes, black hair. They found one in Sweden, 10,000 years old. Same thing, brown skin, blue eyes, black hair. So this blue-eyed thing was already there before the pale skin, right? And they also found that in Africa, the group that has these two genes that make up the pale skin more than any other African group is in Ethiopia. So it's there, but that gene hasn't come out in Ethiopia, so then people is still brown. But that group of people amongst the Africans has that gene more than anybody else in Africa. Right? So this is, so anyway, let's get to the next part.
But it's not just about ancient DNA. Even today, African populations continue to hold genetic variations that are rare or entirely absent in other parts of the world. This makes African DNA a gold mine for researchers
African
studying
DNA,
genetics,
a gold mine,
evolution, and even modern medicine. This incredible diversity and uniqueness mean that African DNA isn't just about understanding the past. It's crucial for the future.
It's crucial.
It provides insights into how humans can adapt to diseases, environmental changes, and other challenges.
Yeah.
For example, by studying the genetic traits of African populations, scientists have made breakthroughs in understanding diseases like malaria, HIV, and even cancer. In the next section, we'll explore why this diversity is so important.
Right.
Not just for Africa, but for humanity as a whole.
Listen to what he's
Genetic
saying.
diversity isn't just a scientific curiosity. It's a critical factor in understanding the survival and adaptability of our species. But why does this matter so much? And how does African DNA play a central role in this story? Genetic diversity is the foundation of adaptability. It's what allows species to survive and thrive in different environments. The broader the genetic pool, the more tools a population has to overcome challenges like diseases, climate changes, and environmental pressures. African DNA, with its unmatched diversity, carries a wealth of genetic variations that have helped humans adapt for thousands of years.
I'm sorry I did cut over him. Sorry for talking over him, but he said one of the important things they're looking to challenge is climate change and environmental circumstances. What's in the news at the moment? Climate change. And that's been talked about for a long time now. So, basically, what he's saying is, African DNA, you heard the man say, is a gold mine in order for our survival. So these people have come to realize, for them to survive into the future, into this changing world, they need to go back to the source of their ancestors. Their ancestors left Africa all them 70,000 years ago, and they left with certain genes that have not diversified in the way that African genes have continued to diversify. They need them back. They need to go back to the source. So where the racists were once preaching about racism and separate races of people, what DNA is showing people that we are all Africans and we all come from Africa, and now they're realizing it. They want to get with the original source. So all this pushing of mixed race, like these adverts and the mixed race children and all that stuff, showing it's now normalizing what they once hated. When I say they, I'm talking about the white Europeans, like in the England and France and and Germany and America. I'm talking about them because they hated the mere fact of mixing at one point, right? So I'm not putting down people who are mixed or who are in mixed relationship. I'm talking about how the white people once hated the mere fact of mixing, the mere thought of it. They did everything they could to not let it happen, right? Just think about America. Think about all them lynchings. Most of them lynchings, most of them men that were lynched was because a white woman was involved. Sometimes they didn't even touch the white woman. They just looked at her and that was enough for them to get lynched, right? They were burned. They were always, nearly always castrated. So their genitalia was always attacked. The part of them that could produce a child with a woman was always attacked, right? That's how much they hated it. The mere thought of someone like me getting with one of their women. And now it's the complete reverse. I can't turn on my television and not see a black man with a white woman. In this country, England, when my dad come here in the 50s, he'd tell me that when them white women who were brave enough to have mixed race children and walk on the street with them, they were spat at. They were insulted, right? Their children were insulted, right? Their children were spat at by other white people because that mother, that white woman dared to go, obviously, with a black man. Right? That's how it was in England. My dad tell me how it was. Right? Them women was brave to push them prams down the street. Right? A lot of them had their babies taken away from them. Forcibly put into homes. Not even adopted. Foster homes because people didn't want. Black people weren't allowed to adopt those children. White people were allowed to adopt them and most of them didn't want to. Black people weren't even on the radar for adopting mixed race children. Can you imagine that? The people who would treat them the best weren't even allowed to. So now basically, DNA science has showed these people that they need the original people. They need their DNA. They need the Africans in order for them to progress into the future, for them to carry on, for them to adapt things that the Africans have. They need to include the Africans. They need to be with them physically and, you know what I mean by physically, to produce so they can keep carrying on. Once they hated us, now they want us.
The concept of interbreeding Africans with other generation is not for the longevity of Africans, but it is there to ensure that those other races thrive. Yeah? Because I told you in the beginning of the video that the most dominant race, the most dominant population is the black people. They are the most dominant. You take a black person against any other race, you'll always produce a black person. That is how dominant it is. And also the melanin that we have, this black skin that you see here. I love myself, by the way. Yeah, I love my hair, you know. It's here to ensure that heat passes through my head, through those channels. Yeah. So back to the topic, you know. Black people are superior. Yeah. Black people are beautiful. Black people are blessed. This man is explaining how they try to make it seem like they are going, like black people need them. They make it seem like they are helping us by providing visa, by giving free passports, by giving free citizenship. They know something is wrong and they have understood genealogy, and they have understood African or the black DNA. There's something about your DNA and melanin, which I was speaking about. Your melanin is not just a black skin color, it's a protective mechanism. You know, as we live today, there's a lot of global warming issues happening around the world. So with having a black melanin, having a black skin which is a higher melanin concentration, acts as a safety mechanism for the increasing amount of sunlight, which also results into higher UV radiation emission into the atmosphere. So having the blacker the skin, the more protected you are. So having the black skin is a protective mechanism. And also remember, there's a time when Bill Gates came to Kenya and Nigeria. He also came to Kenya, yes, but For this case, he came to Nigeria and he was selecting African women in Nigeria and taking their ovaries. He would then use these ovaries to produce medicine. Why would he, of all races, this man is a rich man, he can just pick anyone he wants, but why did he select black people? Leave alone the idea that black people are cheap. There's more to black people than we are being told. There's more to black people than we know, you know? It's through such gentlemen that we're able to discover our true self, our authentic origin, our authentic self. We are able to appreciate who we are for what we are and the position we hold in the world today as black people. There's a time when the whole world was starving, and it is Africa, the land of black people, which had food. They came to Africa to survive. Now they need our DNA. Now they need to interbreed with us so as to ensure that they continue living. So whoever comes to us and tells us that black people, this and that, you are inferior, black people are ugly. I get some comments that Africans like me, we are ugly. I get that, by the way. You don't know what you are saying. That is one thing you need to understand. Africans, we have more to appreciate to ourselves than we know. There's a lot to us. Yep. By the way, I hope that you get value in this channel. I'm going to enjoy my sugarcane after this, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.